Hey, you've made it to Spry Space, where people managing social media accounts come for community. This year, our focus is social media for good. Together, we can work to make social media a landscape for healthy online communities to grow. Sound good? Then come along with us on the Spry Space podcast, where we share what we know, learn what we don't, and strive to make social media better for us all.
To make it on my own. Love me when you can, but know when to let go. I water over sand. The moon, she pulls me home.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Spry Space podcast. I'm Lacey, and today Chad and I are continuing our month of June focused entirely on musicians. So today we've got Krista Herring with us, and Krista's an intuitive and soulful songwriter. I love the use of those words and how we're describing how you're writing songs. She believes deeply in the power of music to transform and heal. Her songs are soulful prose set to the beat of an acoustic guitar and delivered by powerful and captivating vocals. Does it feel? I bet it feels good to have those words said back to you. Krista's based out of the Pacific Northwest and has won the award for Portland's Best Female Artist. Her new album, Like Water, came out last month, and I've been really enjoying listening to it. So, Krista, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you. Wonderful. It feels really good to be, we're just past a month of release of the new album. So, yeah.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about it, but I always like to open. My favorite opening question is, we're so focused on social media for good over here, and sometimes the simplest social media for good is just something that sparks joy. So tell me a piece of social media content that you've seen in the last little while that brought you joy.
Well, that's a little bit of a funny question for me because, two things come to mind. One is, it's interesting that the first thing that when I think of social media, I really don't think about the word joy. So that's really interesting. I get a lot of other experiences such as validation or empowerment or relating, but not often joy. But perhaps I would say that, I think we'd have to go with animal videos or something.
Yeah.
I like those. I like the videos where they surprise somebody about something, or right? Something relatable. I think or of course, babies and animals make us feel. Is it joy? But
even like a sense of awe. Yeah.
Yes.
Animal videos is always a great. You could probably say that with no context, and I'd be like, "Oh yes, animal videos, the joy."
Yeah.
That's our go-to at our house when we can't find something to watch. It's like already too late to watch anything that's long, like an hour long or something like that. But we just need to get work off our minds or something. Go to the animal videos and just feel a little bit better.
Exactly. I don't do much TikTok, but I discovered some of those are funny.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, you could just keep going forever, and it's sort of scary in terms of being a little bit of like a hole that you go down. But I like those ones where people lip sync, like older people lip sync to like little kids. Right. Saying
oh, yeah, that's cute.
Things, but are also like in some ways like, yeah. Like, wish you could say stuff like that.
Right.
I almost feel like I have to, I never ask myself this question, and all of a sudden I'm inspired to share what brought me joy. So I'm going to just go ahead and do it. So there's an account, it's fairly new, and it's called Baby Opie. Okay. Opie is OPIE. And it's a young indigenous boy, maybe 3 years old, 4 years old. And he does, he goes to all of these big, they're even like competitions with his dad where he drums and sings, and he will like lead. It's like a kind of like a callback system that they do. Like one person will make the sounds and then the rest of the group will join in and do the same sound. And like I watched all the videos that he had. He's only had his account for a few months, but I watched every video, and just seeing the energy coming out of this little person, especially when he would sing something and then the whole group would join in. Like, what happened to the energy in his body was just astounding. And I was totally so much joy, large joy watching that. So look up Baby Opie. You would enjoy it very much.
Yes, I will look up that. I got like chills as you described that, which communicates something to me, which, yeah.
I'm glad. It really inspired me a lot too. So I want to talk a little bit first about your album that just came out. So I spent some time over the last week listening to it and kind of digging into it a little bit. It's called Like Water. So tell me about a little bit about the album and what it took to bring it to life over the last year. I'm excited to hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, the album is a little bit more of a concept album, start to finish. It's a story, and it's very much about healing and exploring the themes, which I explored just in my own life, of codependency and healing from that, and the revelations that come from that. So it's very water themed as the name. There's just a lot of there's a lot of flow in it, and there's a lot of just water theme. Gosh, it's just such a huge piece of me, this album, bringing it through. I have many other songs that I wanted to record. I could have done a few albums, but this album came through, and it just felt like important that it come through first. Like, this needs to come through. This healing needs to happen. And usually I'm intuitive about that stuff. So thematically, while it was present in my life, I also find that certain themes are also present within the world, just like as above, so below, and the micro and the macro.
As within, so without.
Yes, all those things. Yeah, like that we're just so connected. And so I have found that what is most present for me tends to be the thing that also has the most medicine as well for the world at the current time. So I just knew I needed to get that out. And even if just for my own healing of one of the most important relationships of my life, and the release and letting go of something so big. That's what it's about. I found that that just needed to happen. And so we went into the studio a few days before the fires hit in
last summer.
Yeah. So just the beginning of September. And actually the day that I left the studio, I was there for a few days, stayed with down in Turner, south of Salem, with at my producer Josh's house with his sweet family, and that was really lovely. And that's how we like to do it, just dive right in. Like, we go in there, and there's several days, and we push. It's like birthing. For me, like birthing a baby. It's like, okay, we birthed the songs, we have this, and come in with a concept. Intuitively, I knew I needed to record them backwards. So on the album, they're start to finish, like first to last in the order that they were written. But I knew that for some reason that I needed to come in and record them the last to the first.
Interesting. Wow. Is that abnormal for your recording style?
Yes. Something about this particular album, there was more vision with it. It guided me in a way more than anything else I've done. I was also more involved with this than anything else. I co-produced this album, so it's the first one that I've done that with. And, I'm at a stage in my life, in my career, where I'm clear about what it is I want and what I don't want. And so it felt really good to be stepping into myself and into really being visible and fully bringing my presence in, and trusting my guidance and my intuition as we create this. So there was a lot of growing pains around that as well. But yeah, we recorded anyhow from last to first, and it came out perfect. It was like the last one we decided to do live, and it came through really almost effortlessly. Yeah. So we did like a live one take. There's a video actually that I posted on my page that I just happened to capture with my phone video camera, that whole take. And normally I don't do that. And of all the things that I captured, that was it. It was the take. So I posted that, and that got a lot of response, which that felt really good. And speaking of bringing joy, that brought me joy for that to be so well received. Yeah. And then I found that as we got closer to the first song in recording, it got a little more difficult. It was really interesting. So those ones were a little more challenging, and there was more to push through there, as is common during this process.
I keep just relating it, since you brought it up like birth, I keep relating it to birth, and I'm like, yes, exactly like that process. You know, as you push through, it gets harder and harder there. And then, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, I know you two both have 2 kids, so you're both know exactly, you're on the same page with that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I also, what kind of inspired me in this too is, I don't know if you read a lot of Elizabeth Gilbert, but I love me some good Elizabeth Gilbert. And one of my favorite books of hers is called Big Magic. And she talks in there about the concept of ideas being things that are alive and that find you and use you as a conduit to come into the world. And that sounded a lot like what you're saying with this album being something that it almost like it had its own vision and kind of guided you through. And, you know, you're the person who gave life to that vision and that idea. And so it makes sense that you would want to have a little bit more control over this, because you knew you were intimate with the idea and the concept and the healing that you were trying to bring with this. So I'm following very well. I feel very inspired by the way that you're communicating about bringing something that's so big like this, like an album that takes so much time and effort and work, and how you worked in coordination with the idea and the vision to bring it to life. I also love the concept of it being water. You know, in my own life, I've had such both physical and metaphorical water being something that's healing, you know, the healing of being in water, of hearing water, of the metaphor and concept of water. How early was the concept of water part of the idea and album?
Well, interestingly, the first song is the title track, and that obviously was the first song ever written.
Which is Like Water.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, so much of it just felt right. It just came through. Something about this relationship, which this whole album is about, there was a lot about water with us. So yeah, just from the beginning, it was very, very interesting. And actually, the medicine of the album for me is the energy of water, the energy of flow, the energy of surrender, the energy of just letting go, just, you know, continuing to move forward into that ocean of who we are and connection to all.
Do you have a favorite place in the Pacific Northwest, a favorite water place?
Ooh. Gosh, I love them all.
I see on social media, Krista is always out at the rivers and the lakes, and almost every other post is some additional beautiful place that she's found. So that is a tough question there. Which one is your favorite?
Right.
Yeah.
Recently, since I've been back in Portland, it's been a lot of going out to the gorge in Hood River and the Columbia.
Oh, yeah.
When I lived in Bend, there's so many beautiful lakes. So we were always going to the water, up there in the desert. And that's where I birthed this album. Most of it, some of it was in Austin, but yeah. So gosh, Elk Lake up there. Oh, there's just so many. I was just at the coast the day before. I'm always getting to water. Where I live in Portland right now is right where the Clackamas and the Willamette meet. So I'm at the corner of two rivers.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Wow, you must be very near me. I'm that's right where I am. I'm in Oak Grove and Jennings Lodge and Oatfield. I'm up on Oatfield Road. So yeah, you're probably very, very near where I am.
Oh yes, I am.
We go to Clackamas Park all the time, and that's right where the two
probably
rivers
walk
come.
to your house after this.
Yeah. Let's do it.
I won't say where I am because I don't want it on the podcast.
Right. That's why I wasn't even, I was like, wait a minute. I need to just give generalized things here. But yeah. We'll all have stalkers right after this.
Watch out, Chad.
One of my favorites is Pool of the Winds. It's on Hamilton Mountain at Beacon Rock State Park, and it's a little waterfall that comes down, but it's mostly enclosed. And so there's like just a few feet wide sliver where the air can escape, which is why it's called Pool of the Winds. And so you can I kind of sneak under the bars because rules. But I'll kind of sneak under the bars and feel that wind on my face and it's so interesting how the water can be cleansing. It can be soft, it can flow, but it can also create this massive power, and that power is part of what's necessary for healing and for moving past something. We can flow along the process all we want, but sometimes it takes that power of water too, to actually move us through to a new stage.
And that second song on my album is called Tidal Wave. Speaking
the
of
power of water.
Yeah.
So when you're a singer-songwriter, the only way you can really have a career in this, right, is if you've built an audience of some sort. And the last 18 months or so has been pretty interesting. So is your audience right now primarily due to pandemic online? And even when it's not pandemic, is your audience online? Are you connecting quite a bit with your audience and your fans online?
Yes, there's two parts to that question. For sure, post-pandemic, the audience is online. But I think in general, we've kind of moved to that place. Now, I wouldn't necessarily be referring to live music, but this is where people are now. Well, especially now, maybe people are starting to move back into the world at this point. But online is, where most of us go, even if it's here or there or whatever. And, that's where the music is. Our music platforms are online. Spotify is a social media, actually. And, music can spread through that. You see, oh, so-and-so is listening to this. I'm going to check that out, right? So that's something that's good about that and that has changed our industry in a very big way. There are two ways to look at it, though. One is that people don't really pay for music anymore. But the other is that people can discover you and you can reach a wider audience. And there's more potential there. So as far as, for me personally, the audience is definitely online. I haven't yet ventured out into performing again. And mostly, it's not that I can't. I've done this for many, many years. And honestly, I started taking a little bit of a break from that before. maybe, certainly the last few years, even before the pandemic, because I think we all go through stages. I spent a lot of years performing out, and maybe some of the same gigs or experiences weren't serving me in the same way. And maybe I was overplaying, and I became a little more internal. I would say that I'm what you'd call an introverted extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
Or something, or is it extra? I don't know which one it is. One or the whatever. But I just found, I needed to go through my own process and my own release of what used to be, a certain sort of death of the dream of the way we thought things were going to show up and look. So
let me keep moving from there then. So, as you have kind of grown this online audience where, especially even before pandemic, you're stepping away from some of your live shows a bit more, as you have grown and connected a bit more with your online audience, what's that like, having kind of this constant access to your fans and your fans having more constant access to you? How has that relationship been as you've started to build more of a following online?
Well, it is really interesting. I mean, it comes with a built-in barrier, right? Because I can choose not to get on social media, or if I'm feeling internal, I can choose not to post. And to be honest, I always post from the place of when the energy feels right and good, like I'm not going to pretend to be happy and make a positive post if I'm feeling not so.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be like wherever I'm at, and I find that works best. But it's not the same as connecting with your audience in person.
Mm-hmm.
Or connecting with people. I love people. And then I also need to be away from them, but sometimes. So, social media is different. It's very necessary for us now, in promoting the music or staying connected to our people, and being relevant, but sometimes it takes a lot. Sometimes it, takes a little bit from us as well, that it's like, I gotta post content.
That's what I'm wondering, is like these boundaries you've been able to build for yourself of only posting from a place of openness and really wanting to share. Did you have to learn that because, you went too far in one direction or the other, or has that just been a pretty easy process for you to make those boundaries with yourself and your followers?
I did need to learn that in my own ways. I'm constantly learning on social media for a lot of reasons because of the algorithms changing and all those things. Mm-hmm. But what is appropriate and not appropriate to share? In a lot of ways, I share the core of who I am, but I might not share certain opinions. I might not delve into certain topics that are quite divisive in this time. And not because I don't think that some of those are important, but it's not my in particular. It's not my path. And I don't want whatever I do to further stoke division. That is a tricky idea, because I also think that part of social media being used for good is to use your voice and to speak truth. And I do think that on certain platforms, there's a lot of censorship, and I don't think that is healthy. Mm-hmm. But again, I learned the hard way about not broaching certain topics on, now let's just say my personal page, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So now my personal page on, let's say, Facebook, it's hardly personal anymore. Mm-hmm. Now, for me, honestly, everything is used for the music, for the public persona, because there has to be that boundary. Mm-hmm. It used to be so easy for us to just think we only see a few people, so we just think communicating to those people, or we have no idea who's seeing our posts, and we just, you know, we might say some things, and then, you know, we triggered something or whatever, and you're like, oh, I didn't even know that person was watching, you know. So I'm not sure how all that works, or, you know, why those people show up out of nowhere. But my point is that I have learned, I've learned to listen to how it feels, to check in about how it feels in my body, to engage in certain ways on social media.
Do you also find yourself using the feedback that you're getting to kind of create the direction for how you'll post in the future as well?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, but I must say that that's annoying in some cases. So if I take Facebook, for example, you know, I know
just for example, because Facebook's the most toxic. Let's just use that one. Okay.
But, you know, if I post, so Facebook's tough because of the algorithm. So if I post a link, not a lot of people are going to see it. It's just going to be suppressed, an external link. So if I post the link to my new album or a link to Spotify or whatever, I know that only a handful of people are going to see that. So that might only get a few likes. Now, if I post a selfie instead, even better if I'm at the river in a bathing suit.
Just for example.
Yeah.
Right, water. And then in there, I talk about, okay, the new album is released, da-da-da-da-da. Mm-hmm. And then I have to, you know, I've learned to say, okay, the link is in the comments. Mm-hmm. So that's a way to hack it, the system a little bit. But yes, you know, unfortunately, whether it's, you know, skewed by Facebook or whether it's just, you know, what people do on Facebook, I've learned to make certain posts. I do know people want to see you, hence Facebook, right? They want to see you. They respond better to my live, you know, video performance than some other things, right? Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, yeah, because you really want to be out there visible.
I imagine, and Chad, I know I just keep talking, so whenever you want to interrupt me, you can interrupt me and ask any question you have. But I imagine as an artist and someone who is as, you know, intuitive and mindful of your own, you know, your own body, talking to yourself, I know for me, sometimes it can be a hard balance between looking at the algorithms and the feedback that I'm getting and showing up authentically. And so do you have any tricks or strategies that you use to help you to kind of balance that idea of really communicating as yourself and authentic and vulnerably, while still trying to stay in line with what is going to help with the algorithms and or what you're getting more engagement from, et cetera?
It actually works hand in hand a little bit in terms of your vulnerability and the response to people, because they do respond best to those vulnerable places. And like I mentioned earlier, sometimes I might sit down and write, and then think, you know, just allow whatever comes through to come through, much in the same way of songwriting. It's kind of like a channeling, and then I just let it come through. And then I think the whole time, like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to want to post this, but I'll just keep writing, just let it become a complete thought. And then, and sharing some of the stories, like, for example, some of the stories behind the songs, which I have shared here and there. On social media, and some of them are very personal, right? Of course, because this whole album is very personal. So some of the stories behind it are very personal. So without, you know, stating names or things like that, I do share my experience, my heartbreak. And sometimes I think, oh, I don't think I should post this. And I might literally have to send it to a friend or two and be like, should I post this? Like, is this TMI? You know? Mm-hmm. And they're like, yes. And I'm like, okay. Because those are usually the times I feel really nervous about it. I could post whatever normally, but then sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to post this.
Who are the people you choose to give that you know, because I think having collaborators like that is a really good tactic for knowing what is, I know you listened to our Social Media for Good panel from last month. And so one of the things talked about in it was strategic vulnerability. Yeah. So the idea of, you know, is what I'm posting is it just serving me because it feels good to get it off my chest, or is it serving my community? But the point I was trying to ask is, how do you choose who these collaborators are who help you to decide whether this is strategically vulnerable or TMI?
Those are usually, I have right now 2 people that I go to, and they're powerful women in my life. One is a mentor, a longtime mentor, who has a spiritual mentor, and somebody who has taught me a lot and continues to help me with the process that we are all going through of letting go and releasing a lot of these old patterns and stories and returning to ourselves. So my friend Jolie Nicole, she's somebody that I go to, and actually I often go, we'll send it to my daughter. I have my older daughter is 22 years old, and she is also a lovely, talented singer-songwriter. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes, and we're very close. I had her when I was 18. So, and I trust her seeing and knowing as well. So,
I was going to add to the discussion about the types of content people put out and where the most vulnerable stuff usually gets the best response, and that's songwriting in general. I think there's a lot to do with storytelling, but it's a lot to do with accessing this emotional vulnerability that people can relate to, and that's what's been really strange about social media as it has evolved. Like when we were putting out albums, it was kind of a package. It was a concept. Like you're saying, maybe this newest album is Conceptual, where from start to finish, there's a storyline. And then social media came along and everything is in snackable bits, you know? And so there's this dilemma of, do you work really, really hard on putting out that thing that you've polished over and over and over and over again to you know, till you're ready, and that's a good thing. But there's something to be said about putting out little bits of stuff that are closer to the original intent than a polished piece. You know what I mean? And so I think over the years, it's been really interesting for people like us, artists and musicians, trying to release our content and have it still be digested by the intended audience, but also staying close to the roots of what you intended in the first place, which could be very conceptual and it could be huge. I mean, I know my stuff is usually just like this massive idea, and I literally have to whittle things apart and take, well, this is the best of this and this is the best of this, and even then it seems like too much, you know, and so I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's created whole new strategies for us.
It's why I like you talking about how some of the content that you put out over social media is like little bits of peeks into the story behind songs, right? And
even something that you didn't intend. You said, you know, you just set your phone up for that one thing, had no idea that was going to be the one. That's cool. That's magical, you know?
Yeah, I learned, and I learned over the course of, well, I released a few singles starting this winter, like one a month, and then released the full album. But during the course of releasing so often, which is a lot of work, it's a lot every single month. They get to the finish line and you're like, I don't know if I can do it. But I learned kind of what works and what doesn't, what people respond to the most. And, you know, when you release your baby, when you birth your baby, you want to give it the best chance, right? So you want people to connect. You don't want them to just keep scrolling through like, oh, well, cool, Krista released another thing. Cool, I'll check it out later. And they do that a lot. But if you have a few words on there, or a lot of words in my case, you know, just, you know, pulling them in and telling them telling them the story and where it came from and how vulnerable it is and powerful for you, then they're more likely to get pulled in. And I have found it's almost a bit of a trade. There was a point where I was a little resentful to have to do that. You know, because it's like, oh, nothing's private anymore.
Right.
Right. But in the end, I think that is the power of social media, is our showing up in vulnerability and full presence and sharing with one another so that we can feel connected, so that we don't feel alone. And, you know, that's where a lot of healing comes from. Absolutely.
And one thing I want to clarify too is for listeners is, you know, vulnerability doesn't mean weakness, right? It doesn't mean, you know, we're sharing this sad story, or we're sharing. Vulnerability really means, what is it, more like openness? You know, it's more like transparency and openness. You think transparency is a better word for it?
Yes, that was the word that came to me, and then you said it. So that's how it was.
Almost like water. Almost like water.
Clear.
You can see through water. It's transparent.
Oh man.
So you went ahead and throughout this pandemic, then you've been releasing singles. Have you also done any sort of like live streams or live stream concerts? Did you do anything like that?
You know what? I am one of maybe the few, I don't know how many people are, but that have chosen not to do that. I definitely, you know, when I have written new songs, and then I will record them, you know, maybe put little videos out just to share that. But I don't know what it is. I'm not like a super big fan of the live on the video thing. It feels so different for me. Like what I love about performing, and I'm not sure, by the way, that I love it as much as I used to love it, right? So I'm a little more focused on the end of the songwriting and the creation and the publishing and licensing, you know, getting the music out there, the music for the quiet moments. But I am not the biggest performer anymore, mainly because my music is sort of created for the quiet moments. And so the right shows can be great. But, you know, some of these other gigs that we've been doing for years, right? The gigs we did all in our 20s, and, you know, sometimes we don't, you know, those are just draining and distracting, and, you know.
Right. I think you're talking about touring is what you're talking about. Like we get old, and then we think that touring isn't as cool as we used to think it was, because it's just being on the road and eating bad food and never sleeping in the same place and all that stuff. Yeah.
And now we're like, oh my God, I love sleep so much. Like
I would rather just be in my own bed.
Like I love to go to bed at 10, you guys.
Yeah.
I'm the weirdest musician. I'm like, I go to bed early and I get up early, and I'm on time to places, and
nice.
Yeah. So it's the lifestyle that I no longer love, that performing lifestyle. But that being said, you know, so I guess a lot of us gave that up for a while, and maybe that was a really healthy thing, right? To kind of get back to, you know, to reset ourselves, reset our systems in a way, and feel like, oh, who am I without that? What does this look like? What does this feel like when my nervous system is a little more regulated?
Well, it's interesting that you communicate that over time for yourself, you've kind of gone a little bit more introspective, and you describe your music as something for the quiet moments. And so it makes perfect sense that that you feel the most fulfilled really when you were recording that in the studio on your own. And like, that more mimics how people would be ingesting that content too, right? Is this one-on-one powerful moment between the song and your thoughts and your heart and your soul. And that would be very difficult to translate to a live stream or a live performance in front of a large group of people. It's harder for us to introspect and to feel those feelings that can come in a quiet moment.
That's so true. I want to take this opportunity to just tell the backstory a little bit about how Krista and I met. When I first moved to Portland, and it was like 2006 or 2007 or right around there, and I was a performing songwriter, and I decided to start a family and stay home, and I had my first baby. I said, I won't go out and tour for 1 year. Okay, that was my plan, and then I kind of just stopped touring and started raising a family. And so I was playing music around Portland and trying to find other musicians to play with. And I met Krista, I think, through these things that were called singer-songwriter soirees. And it was put together by our friend Robin Jackson. And they were always held in somebody's house. And it was a group of anywhere from, 20 to 75 people that would show up. And it was just like a songwriter in the round, where each person would get a chance to just play an acoustic guitar or acoustic instrument. Some people played piano, but everybody was performing their own original songs. And it was just that intimacy that was just thrilling for all of us. And so that's Krista and I were at so many of those, and they were just, I miss them. They're probably still going on too, I think. Do you know, is Robin still doing those?
I think he is. I just recently saw a post. They're outdoors. Yeah, maybe.
And they're up to like 500 of them by now or something. But that's the performing intimately with people and exchanging that energy is something that's really hard to recreate in a live stream. So, yeah.
Yeah, and performing on stage, I actually always loved being on stage. In the right setting, right? Mm-hmm. To be able to set the tone of the energy of the room, and bring, and so I do love that. There are certain gigs that I no longer want to do, I'm not going to go be dinnertainment, and I'm not going to go play in the bar, or,
Did you say dinnertainment? I've never heard that phrase before. I like it.
Oh, we've all done it. Those are probably the ones that pay the most money, Yeah. And
absolutely.
then the ones you love the most, maybe they don't pay at all,
That's right.
Yeah. So, leaving that behind, but I did love the stage at one point. And so, not to say that I won't want to do that again, but I am allowing, now that I've really tuned into my body and I've learned to listen to my body and my feelings in response around things. And I listen, to when I feel inspired to do something. So at this time, I'm not yet feeling inspired to do live performing. And I never really felt inspired to do any live streams, just because that's very different, right? Than seeing people in the audience or feeling their energy in the room.
Well, I got a big backyard. We're going to have to invite you over. I hear you live close by. And we'll just play acoustic guitars in the back. So.
Oh, perfect.
Well,
I can totally do that.
Okay.
As we're getting close to the time here, I want to just move to my last question that I ask everybody, because, it's important that we're so mindful of the content that we're putting out on social media and the content that we're taking into social media. But I think it's also important that we openly discuss our own relationships to social media. How are we doing? When you're alone in the dark scrolling by yourself, how you doing? So from your perspective, Krista, how's your relationship to social media. And I'm going to give you some structure. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being like it's pretty unhealthy and you should probably, I'll refer you to a social media counselor right now, and 10 being you could put on a social media mental health course today, where would you rate yourself on how your relationship is going with social media?
I think I would rate myself pretty high. I'll just, give a little leeway from like 8 to 10, and only because, there's still a tendency sometimes for me, like all of us, like to do comparisons. And that's not helpful for me. But other than that, I don't do a whole lot of scrolling. I like to look at beautiful nature pictures or, whatever. It might be, I'll still do the first thing in the morning and the last thing, at night. But for the most part, I try to give myself balance away from the screen. I try to be outside as much as possible. So unless it's really hot, like the last couple of days, then I hide inside, and I don't love that. But otherwise, I feel like my relationship to it is pretty healthy. Yeah, I've just learned my boundaries with it.
Good. That's awesome.
I love to hear it. I'll set up your social media mental health course. You can start next week, and you can teach it to all of the people who are a 4. Okay.
You need to find new ways to make money now.
Well, Krista, thank you so much for your time and for giving us your presence and your energy here for the last hour or so. Anybody who wants to follow Krista and hear a little bit more about what she's doing and delve into her album Like Water, you can find her on Facebook, just searching Krista. And did I pronounce it right? Is it Herring? Okay, so Krista Herring on Facebook, on Instagram, on Spotify. Anywhere else you want to point them to?
I think that's great. Facebook, Instagram, Spotify. You can download on my Bandcamp. It's really easy, honestly. All you need is my name. You can just search that and things will come up.
Okay. Well, thank you. We appreciate your time so much, Chad. Thank you so much for bringing Krista to us.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
Yes.
And those of you listening, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, drive, whatever you're doing. We hope that you always keep learning. We will talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
You need me to be, but I know I try to do right, and I love you like water.
This Spry Space podcast is produced by Spry Social Media Marketing, Digital Marketing Agility. Edited by Chad Hinman and executive produced by Lacey Fott.